Good evening once again, folks. How's it going out there? Welcome back here to a Wednesday night, October 8th, 2025, 9:08 p.m. That's California time out here. Latest activity here on the globe shows a 1.8 across Texas in the oil fields. Also, should be a red flag out here somewhere. I don't see the red flag. Hiding out here somewhere. Anyway, before we get to all this earthquake activity, I'm sure you guys have seen a couple articles here put out recently. This is just one by the Oregon State University in regards to the Cascadia and the San Andreas fault connection, how they are likely to trigger one another or rupture at the same time in synchronized events that would result in a huge devastated West Coast earthquake out here. I mean, if you think about it, the Cascadia is capable of a 9.1. You throw in the San Andreas fault, and then it's just complete devastation out here. But this article put out by the Oregon State University, this is not the only site. ABC News and a couple other sites out there were talking about this. Make sure all the bells are off. And we're just going to go over this a little bit here and explain how they discovered that they can trigger one another here. There's a team of researchers, for one, drilling offshore in deep sea sediment where they sample cores representing about 3,100 years of geologic history. And these guys analyze layers known as turbidites that are deposited by underwater landslides, often triggered by big earthquakes. Okay, so they found here in the comparison of different areas from different cores from both fault systems, and they found similarities in the timing structure, suggesting that the seismic synchronization between the faults occur at the same time, right? I've been talking about that for quite a bit. There's been 3 instances for one, right, in the past 1,500 years, including the most recent one in 1700. That's when the last big Cascadia struck, but they also believe that's not the last time, but before the 1906 earthquake, the northern segment of the San Andreas fault went. Literally, it looks like within minutes or hours apart. If you really think about it, it's very possible. A lot of naysayers say that, it's too far apart. How can the Cascadia rupture a fault system hundreds of miles away? Well, technically, they're linked in a fashion when it comes to the geological processes out here of the plate boundaries and whatnot. They're really not all that far away. It's something to watch pretty close here, folks, because for one, the Cascadia could be overdue. And 2, the San Andreas fault, is overdue along the southern segment and the central section. The northern section, that's what I'm kind of wondering about here, though. Because we last had an earthquake back in 1906, right? The big 7.9 out there, San Francisco. That, over 100 years ago. Now, whether there's enough strain or not, it's possible. I worry about, they mentioned here about the northern section of the San Andreas fault, but what's the possibility here of a Cascadia resulting in an entire rupture here of the San Andreas fault, including the southern segment? Is that possible? Very possible. I guess if so much time has passed and the strain is fairly, built up, I don't see why that couldn't happen out here. So that'd be an enormous event with a super lengthy fault rupture out here. And I'm telling you, the San Andreas fault here is just one of those areas that's overdue here for some large earthquake activity. In fact, the extreme southern end here of the San Andreas fault did not rupture back when the 1857 7.9 earthquake struck, right? That was a portion of the southern branch here of the San Andreas fault. Not the entirety, but a portion here. So, and that was 168 years ago. 168 years ago. That's just above the regular intervals that occur out here. The regular intervals, I believe, is between 150 and 160 years. So we're outside of that regular zone, putting us at a time frame where we could see some large earthquake activity. This is way outside our zone, right? So with this not rupturing back in the 1857 event, more than likely that will go along with it, resulting, just say, for example, if the southern portion went in its entirety, that's capable of an 8.1 out here. So, but when you factor in everything else with the Cascadia, man, it seems like a lot of doom and gloom, and realistically, Scientifically, very possible that could be implemented out here in our lifetime. Hopefully, we're all prepared for it. I just don't see it holding off much longer. A lot of complacency out here. When you start hearing people saying, "Oh, I've been hearing about this since the '80s and '90s," and I remember my parents tell me that there's a big one overdue in Southern California, and they have yet to have it. These other faults over here along the Santa Barbara area and the Ridgecrest event and other earthquakes away from the San Andreas fault are just secondary or third fault systems away from the plate boundary. The plate boundary itself is where all the big time strain builds up, and that is where the big ones take place out here. Not saying these other ones can't produce big earthquakes, but this is the reason why these other ones are stirring up out there, because of the interaction between the two plates here. Okay, so it's an interesting article. It's fairly lengthy. Maybe a couple minutes to read here. We're not going to go through and read the entirety, so I'm going to include the link here in the video description if you want to check it out. But this has just made the news here in the last couple days. This was put out here on the 6th, so about 2 days ago or so. But I've been saying about the connection here for quite a while. All right, let's see what we got here for anything above 2.5 since this morning's update. A 3.3 out in Nevada. Looks like another 2.5 there along the Pinnacles area. That's along the creeping section of the San Andreas Fault. That not quite going down here to the Parkfield section. In fact, it looks like it's just the northern edge here of the creeping section. The Parkfield segment here is coming up. Everything's coming up, right? It's not like we had any big events recently along the San Andreas Fault. Yeah, the most recent one, I think, is a 1906 earthquake, right? When you think of the plate boundary. Yes, other fault systems out here. The 1989 earthquake, Loma Prieta earthquake, I believe that was associated off of the San Andreas Fault. I don't think that was specifically on the San Andreas Fault. And even so, that magnitude is not anything near what it's capable of producing. So yeah, Parkfield segment definitely overdue. Southern branch overdue as well. It's crazy. Let's see what we got here. Off the coast here of Santa Barbara to the south, looks like it's on this fault system called the Red Mountain Fault Zone. Little one-pointer, nothing big, 1.6, nothing big going on there for now. The southern branch of the San Andreas Fault sleeping, but a couple earthquakes off of it. There's that swarm going on over there in Nevada. This is north of Warm Springs. This is not the swarm that was stirring up here around Valmy, Nevada. That's gone quiet, but if you think about it, when things really amplify out here across the Great Basin and the Intermountain West, that's a sign there of things of, pretty much maximum pressurization here, with all that pressure transferring inland here to all these other fault systems. It slowly does it, but there's signs out here of, a lot of activity going on. This is just the last 30 days of earthquakes here along the West Coast. Let's try to get rid of the oil fields out there. How's 4,256 earthquakes sound out in the last 30 days? That's a lot of earthquake activity. As far as anything above 2.5 goes, yes, we've seen a lot of it. A lot up here across the Gorda. Gorda, it's a spreading seafloor center up here. Gorda Escarpment, Blanco Fracture Zone, adding further stress and strain here across the southern end of the Cascadia. Just a lot of movement out here, and there's all that swarming up in Nevada. Definitely got some signs out here of maximum pressurization going on here. How much longer it's going to hold off, who knows. This earthquake up here, 2.8, underneath this area, 28 miles deep. It looks like they've adjusted that. It wasn't that deep. I think it was about 19 miles deep, so they made it deeper. That is associated with the Cascadia subduction zone. No fault surface, or no surface faults up here. That is right around or slightly up above the tremor zone. The tremor zone is just slightly deeper underneath this area. And let me go check out the Cascadia slow slip events here today. Let's see what we got for a number. Oh yeah, still kicking up there. 423 epicenters of slow slip events, and right around where that deeper earthquake struck, right? So we're getting some pressurization going on there. When we see slip events there, that's just a further sign that, everything could be getting ready out here for a big earthquake along the Cascadia. That's further stressing certain areas up here. Now that's up in Washington. There's a little bit here in the Oregon area, southern coast of Oregon. Not so much going on down there for earthquake activity. Same for Northern California, just a little spotty there. But yeah, we just got to be prepared, folks. As far as any new movement goes across the volcanoes, I guess we can double check that. Go to Mount St. Helens here real quick, see what we have. And we're going to go with this seismograph station right here. And we'll take a look, see what's going on. Yeah, look at that. Well, there's some earthquakes showing up there. There's a 2.8 earlier in Washington. Notice how it's kind of a thick signal, meaning that it's away from this seismograph station here. These earthquakes are almost, really close in proximity to the earthquakes. That's why they're showing up quite nicely and spiky here on the graph. The previous UTC time here, which shows this morning and afternoon, still shows some earthquake activity out there. Some deeper ones, maybe some, far away, either far away or very deep earthquakes underneath this area. And what are they showing here? We got one earthquake from, and this is just from last night. So they haven't even counted anything. None of those quakes that have been showing up here on the map have been accounted for or credited onto the USGS map here. So there's definitely still some earthquake activity there across Mount St. Helens. Why they're not focusing more on that, I don't know. Glacier Peak up here, I accidentally clicked on it. This is one it's only got one seismograph station up here. And not for sure what that is. That 2.8 did show up there. Previous runs. There's one earthquake, it looks like, local. But I don't think they showed that up there. Negative. Let's check out Mount Rainier real quick here. I like to double check these because, just taking somebody's word for it when it says, yeah, there was no earthquakes in Washington today, or Mount St. Helens is completely quiet. That is untrue. That's not correct. This is Mount Rainier. Yes, there's a handful of earthquakes out there as well. These are very small ones. Nothing in comparison to what we've seen there last July, or this, past July there, where there was hundreds of earthquakes occurring every day. The swarm is still continuing, but not as intense. All right. What do we got up in Yellowstone? Hello. That's a 2.8 coming in there at 9:06. So did that show up on the... Where's my Yellowstone station at? Do I not have one up here? What? Okay, I'll have to add it on here. But that's a decent earthquake up there, right? Probably one of the more larger ones here in the last 30 days, I would say, in this area. If you go here to the largest event, oh, maybe I take it back. There was a couple threes out there, 2 threes. Here's today's 2.8. They've had a little swarm out there around Mammoth, Wyoming. That's on the northwestern corner of Yellowstone National Park, or Yellowstone Supervolcano there. I do want to see what's going on with that. 2.8. That might be a start of a good swarm. We'll have to see. It's right up here. This graph is offline, so technically we got to use the next closest one. Yeah, it looks like there's a 2.8. There was another quake before that. And notice they didn't report that other quake, even though it's showing up quite nicely. Not as strong as a 2.8, but that's still an earthquake. Some of the other events there in the last 24 hours. But we'll have to watch that, see if that doesn't turn into some type of swarm. Sometimes, Yellowstone's been known to kick up some interesting swarms out here, but there's really nothing of, any major concern when it comes to the supervolcano right now, unless we got some, major uplift going on. That swarm is, unfortunately, we don't have any super close seismograph stations here. Maybe this one, and that one's offline. There's Mammoth up here. Let's see what this one's like. That one, remember that, this went down in 2008. There were certain areas of Yellowstone supervolcano that went up. This one, it doesn't look all that concerning. That's one of them. Let's check out this other one here. This one's just offline, it looks like, so you really can't compare data. This area, though, kind of going up since about 2022 here. Last couple model runs there going up as well. This, I think it fluctuates a little bit in certain areas. Like if you compare that region to other areas, this one's gone down. You know, there's all sorts of things that can affect the ground swelling and whatnot. That's going down. This is an area right outside of Lake Yellowstone there that caused some panic back in 2008 when we had literally thousands of earthquakes swarming out there in the I think it was 2008 towards December, and then January 2009. I've seen a lot of uptick, a lot of people fear-mongering videos on that, and then it went down. The swarm ended, and it went down. Went up a little bit there in 2015 as well. We had a decent swarm, and then it went down. And that's where we're at right now. Going down, at least in that area, a little bit of uplift across the Mammoth area, but we'll definitely kind of watch that. Nothing of any concerning nature for now, just a 2.8. Yes, they get them, and as you can see here in the last 30 days, they've had they had a couple of them out there. They've had 2 of them in the same area. All right, backing out of here. Anything else going on? New Madrid seismic zone. That's that one earthquake from this morning. All right, let's take a look here at the rest of the globe. Oh, man, Turkey's back to swarming again. Look at that. 4.9, a bunch of other 2s and 3s in there. This has been an interesting event out there. I'm telling you, if we go back it's not going to show all the earthquakes here on the map, but there's literally been hundreds of earthquakes stirring up out there in Turkey. And this is all supposedly from a 6.1 that stirred up here months ago. So I do think there's something else building out here because there's technically 2 areas of swarming, and we can see that here on the other map, which I'll pull up here real quick. We'll go over to the station, the Raspberry Shake station here. Kind of neat to see when it comes to smaller earthquake activity here around the globe. This is Western Turkey. This is where the swarm's stirring up. That is a 4.1 from a couple days ago. But the main point is showing you a couple areas of swarming here. This is our more recent one, but that ongoing activity right now is stirring up from one of these. I believe it's over here. But it's interesting because all this activity follows a huge swarm around the Santorini, Greece area from earlier this year. I just think there's something bigger brewing underneath this area. Excuse me. Whether it's purely just plate stress or maybe something going on underneath here, but definitely got a lot of earthquake activity stirring up. The Campe Flegrei fields, I don't see any major increasing movement here, and this is going to show some of the smaller quakes as well. Over the last week, there's only been, a handful up here around this area. Nothing of concern that I can see. Of course, this is always floating around social media saying, oh man, watch out, get out of there, it's going to blow. But this area has a common feature where the land kind of inflates and then it goes back down and then inflates. It's actually rather interesting there. All right, let's back out of here, see what else we got. Got a 4.2 way north there on top of the globe. Nothing major going on across the Atlantic for now. Some older activity there off the coast of, I believe that's Venezuela, or Guatemala, excuse me, from earlier. Nothing new to report in this region. Maybe a couple smaller quakes down the line here, but Alaska, 4.2 out there along the Aleutian Trench. Still seeing some aftershock activity there across the Kamchatka area. Ooh, a 3.3 right smack dab in Section E, it looks like, here of the Nankai Trough. We better go double check that and see what we have from the Japan Meteorological Agency here. There's a 3.3. Is that the one we're looking for? That is, yeah, right around Section E. Section E here of the Nankai Trough is an area that did not rupture back when these other 2 did. I believe it was in 44 and 1946. we've explained this a lot out here. I've covered this a lot in previous videos, how they rupture, and if we don't get a full rupture, or at least one, sitting out, then more than likely the next time this thing goes into a series of ruptures, earthquakes, the whole thing will go, which is, a larger magnitude. And it can produce some big earthquakes out there. But so there's that 3.3. I don't see any swarm going on. Otherwise, it would be noted here. We'd see, a whole bunch of earthquakes showing up with the same similar time frame out here, but it's not. But we do got to watch the Nankai trough. It is under quite a bit of strain out there. Decent earthquakes there, about Taiwan southward, all the way to Papua New Guinea. 3.5 coming in right now as we speak into a portion of the Java Trench. Almost 200 kilometers deep there for that earthquake. Pretty deep one. One earthquake there around Vanuatu, a little 4.6. New Zealand holding on there. No big earthquake activity yet, but it's one of many out here on the globe that's quite possibly could see some large earthquake activity soon. All right, so remember, nothing, as we look right now, there's definitely some earthquake activity stirring up, but the largest, let's see what we got here for the largest in the last 24 hours. Wow, see, that's very minimal, at least in the last 24 hours here. Is only a 5-pointer. That's well below average in terms of daily counts out here. I'm probably going to jinx it. But normally on any given day, we could see a handful of 5s or even a 6. And, the largest one we have so far is a 5-pointer. And that's from early this morning. So pretty low right now in terms of earthquake activity as far as the large movement goes. But we do have a massive coronal hole facing us. Now, this is going to be a good test. The sun getting eclipsed right there from the moon, I believe. Actually, I believe it's the Earth here that is eclipsing the sun right now. And the reason why is because the spacecraft is probably within view of the Earth and the sun at the same time, as an eclipse happens. The moon the other day, it didn't cover it as this much. You could see it eclipsing it a little bit, but this looks more, the curvature here looks more like Earth is in the line of sight there from the sun to the spacecraft that gets this data. That's way too broad of an angle. Anyway, it seems like we always catch that around this time of night, every 24 hours, which makes sense. Coming up right now. Okay, back to the coronal hole number 85 that is currently facing the planet. A lot of people putting their money on that this causes big earthquake uptick on the planet here. So we're going to watch this. It's currently facing us, and it's actually, this is a fairly recent image here, a few hours behind. But it's facing us. Magnetic lines here shooting straight out from the sun into space, directed at us. It is center disk. This could be a very good test here when it comes to whether this is, coronal holes are responsible for earthquake uptick or not. Like I say, a lot of people put their money on it. They're 100% convinced. I'm not 100% convinced. I'm keeping a total tally. I just started this here within the last year. Comparing how when the planet gets slammed with a large CME, or if a massive coronal hole is facing the Earth, or if we get a large solar flare or proton events, and we see how that affects the plate tectonics in terms of earthquake activity. But you really can't say, say 2 weeks down the road we get an 8.0 earthquake somewhere. One cannot realistically go back and say, yeah, that 8.8 or 8.0 is the result of coronal hole number 85 that was facing the planet 2 weeks ago. You just can't do that. You can't just, it doesn't work out that way. You really have to look at a view here, and realistically speaking, if we're waiting on the high-speed solar wind stream to slam into the planet, it's going to be about 48 to 72 hours, so we'll wait 2 to 3 days. But the magnetic lines here are definitely already shooting out from this coronal hole. But we'll see what happens here in the coming days, right? Right now there's no big uptick, very weak in terms of earthquake magnitudes out here in the last 24 hours. But that is center position, so any coronal or any high-speed solar wind stream that's flowing from this coronal hole should definitely be geo-effective here in the coming days in terms of aurora uptick. Right now, nothing major going on for the auroras. Very low, very, very low. Flare threat is dropping like a rock as well. I'm pretty much going to drop mine down to this level that he has on his site because there's really nothing. Everything's weak. It's all going away. We got a couple days before we see any further sunspot activity that may be worth talking about. This is from this is almost a day old now. We got this area over here that will be approaching the eastern limb in the next couple days, but I'm really not all that concerned about it. It's got some coverage area. This is the far side of the sun. There's imagery you can they can use here to see what's happening to an extent on the far side of the sun. And these two coronal holes on the far side, this one will be approaching us in the next couple days here. But the flare threat right now, very low. 10% chance there for M flare, X flare at 1%, and look at the C flare category, 60%. What? Crazy. So you could have, there's a lot of sunspots on the sun, right? If you count them all, but you could have 100 of these all over the place. That doesn't mean nothing unless you're looking at the magnetic complexity. They got to be complex here. You have to have that negative positive complexity that creates a spark out here, a flare. All right, let's see here. I think that's about it for space weather activity. Yeah, but go check this out if you get a chance. It's worth reading. I covered the Cascadia a lot on here, maybe too much, but I don't think we can never get out too much information here when it comes to being prepared. The main thing is making sure everyone knows what is possible in their region and how to be prepared for a big event like this. Because I live out here on the West Coast. I live in Northern California. It's going to be it's going to not be good. But we got to be prepared. A quick glance here at the weather outlook. Got a massive low pressure system there across the Pacific Northwest. Going to bring some much cooler temperatures and a lot of rain here for California as we head towards early next week. I do like the looks of that. We'll probably stay in a cooler pattern out here for the West Coast, ridging out across the east. This is for the GFS, the ECMWF model. Let's see what this paints a picture of here. Roughly about the same as the GFS model. Maybe slightly more aggressive when it comes to rainfall out here across California. That's a nice area right there, just off the coast, funneling in moisture from the south that has soaked the valley and the coast ranges. So we'll watch that and see how that plays out. This is just over the next couple runs here. Not so much rain over here across this area of the country, but I'm sure it's coming. Don't worry. The more that you guys are underneath high pressure, the deeper the troughs are over here across the West Coast, and that's where I'm at right now. If I lived over here, I'd be wanting high pressure out along the West Coast so we can get our troughing over here with the jet stream bringing in some fall time temperatures out there and maybe some precipitation, but right now it's opposite. All right, I'm out of here, folks. Have yourself a good evening. Just stay safe out there. I know, some of these articles can be a little scary, but we got to be prepared. We just can't, run away from it. We live out here. Natural hazards and disasters are a part of our daily lives, no matter where you live at. Seriously, no matter where you live at out here, things can happen. You can have volcanoes, you can have tsunamis, you can have tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, forest fires. It's the planet Earth. It's very active, geologically speaking there. It's not a dead planet whatsoever. All right, have a good one. We'll see you guys back out here for the, and I messed up the date. I know. I didn't catch it until a couple hours down the road, but on my thumbnail there from my morning update, I put Thursday. And I seen a couple comments on there. It wasn't intentional. I just, for whatever reason, I didn't say it in my video. I said the correct date, Wednesday. But for some reason, I put a Thursday in there. Unless that, I don't know, it may have been, it may have already been up there. See, that was a thumbnail I made, so I don't know. Maybe I typed that in. I don't know. Anyway, mistakes happen, right? But we'll get this one right Wednesday night. Have a good one. We'll see you guys out here in the morning for the Thursday morning update.